Good afternoon, everyone. Very nice to welcome you to this third innovation practice group on health and well-being. My name is Marcel Goyenete, and together with my colleague Stephanie Piacentino from the Red Cross Climate Center, we'll be facilitating today's IPG. Now, before we start with the IPG, we have about 16 people in the room, including us. So let's hope we have a few more people joining us today. I would like to do a little check-in. I know we're connecting from all over Europe, and I would like you to open your chat window, and we're going to do a little weather check-in. We want to know, what is the weather like in all of the different places you're connecting from. So take a moment, look out your window. You're going to be weather expert for just a second. Now, look out your window and tell us in the chat where you're connecting from and what is the weather like outside. We have Joanna from Ruhr area, Germany. Welcome, Oliver. Great weather in Central Zealand. Rainy day in Croatia. Sunny London. Windy, blue sky, humid and quite cold. Slagles Hospital. And in Lyon we have, oh, in Lyon it's raining. Slovenia, rainy day. In Spain, very sunny as usual. I see you're bragging a little bit. 16 degrees, light shower in Armenia. Very good. Thank you very much. I think we're ready to start. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so let's go ahead with the health and well-being innovation practice group. Just a few technical considerations. Please keep your microphone muted when you're not speaking, but be assured you can unmute and ask questions. We'll have a round of questions at the end, but if you're really burning to ask a question in between, you can do so as well, of course. So unmute to contribute and double check your audio levels before you do. As to seeing each other, it's so nice when there is a face on the other side. So if your connection allows you to, please do turn on your camera. It makes the whole experience nicer for you, nicer for us, and everybody in the room. We will, if you want to say something, use the raise hand function, which you can do. If you want to react to anything with the reaction function of Zoom, you can do that as well. You can use the chat to share comments or questions if that feels more comfortable for you. And last but not least, please do click on the participant button, and next to your name, you will find a button with which you can rename yourself to, and I would ask you to please include the region you're connecting from in your name. Today, we have a very interesting IPG. We will have a presentation by the Zealand region, who will give us a very interesting perspective on health and well-being. And we will really delve more in this IPG into how to make health services more resilient. Our past IPGs, if you have attended them, they are focused very much on more on the public health and well-being of the population side of health and well-being. Now we will go more into the health service and infrastructure aspect, which I think it's a really interesting take for this IPG. And we don't only want to just deliver content, we also believe that all of us are in one way or another experts and can contribute to the thinking behind this approach. So we have, after the presentation, a very interesting exercise prepared to develop a causal map of in what ways do climate risks create a domino effect within health services, and climate impacts trickle down this chain. It's a very easy exercise. It's anonymous. There are no breakouts. It's all going to be individual work. So, and as I said, very easy to go about. We'll have a synthesis of that. We have an expert with us in this session that will then be able to also contribute some additional perspective. And with that, we'll get to the closing of this IPG. So just to recap, maybe you've seen this before. If you're new to IPGs, there's a little introduction on what the IPGs are. And these are really sessions that complement the overall capacity strengthening work of P2R. But it's a bit more free in the sense that it is a space to really foster learning, share knowledge, be able to talk about regional challenges and needs, and give us a bit more breadth on how we think about ideas, plans, and possible solutions. It's a great way for us to connect different regions together in a way that eventually they don't do through other parts of P2R. We are creating these communities. So this is the third and final IPG. Nonetheless, we do want these IPGs to live on after this project concludes. And yeah, it's a great way to provide additional knowledge and exchange opportunities. So as I mentioned, this is the third one. We had one in March, a second one in June. Now we're in October, and there will be a final event, which will allow us to bridge the journey between the two cohorts. And yeah, and we have a couple of tools that we're working with. So there is a Miro board that captures all of the IPGs over time. And we'll share that link later on. And everything that comes out of this session will be put on there as well. You can have a look and see what has come out of previous IPGs. You will see previous session content, resources, and all the materials that have been put together. So today's IPG, I think I already discussed a little bit about that. So we are featuring Zealand region, a region in Denmark. And with us today, we have three guests. First, we have Louise Jeppesen. Louise has a master's degree in techno-anthropology from the University of Southern Denmark, where she wrote her thesis on change theory. And for the past 1.5 years, she has worked in Region Zealand as part of the Regional Unit for Green Transition, where her main focus has been on climate adaptation in municipal and interregional collaborations. We also have with us Oliver, and Oliver holds a bachelor in emergency and risk management, combined with a master's degree in international politics and development. His thesis was focused on the challenges related to standardization of disaster data, so data used by many people today around the world. He has a background including internships in international development with UNDP in Belize, disaster risk reduction with ADRC in Japan, as well as a professional background working with cybersecurity in the police. And most recently, he has an emergency, and he has worked as an emergency and preparedness consultant for the Danish health sector, where he has been working as program manager for the Climate and Resilience P2R project, with the aim of better prepare ourselves in the light of changing climate risks. So Oliver and Louise will present on the Zealand region. And then we also have with us Firdousa Ibrahim. Firdousa also works at the Red Cross Climate Center, and she supports climate health initiatives in low and middle income countries. So particularly Africa, where she leads work on anticipatory action for epidemics in Burkina Faso, climate and health vulnerabilities assessment in Mali, and leading a case study regarding heat wave impacts on health in Burkina Faso, and for the advocacy report on climate and health in Africa. Very good. So with that, I would like to pass the floor over to Oliver. I'm going to stop sharing to give you the floor. and tell us a little bit about this approach on strengthening health systems to make them more resilient to the impact of climate change.
Yes, thank you very much for the intro. I'll just share my screen. Let's see here. Bup, bup, bup. Uh, Can you all see it now?
Yes, we can.
Yep. So yeah, before I jump straight into it, we'll just give you a little bit of info about our region to sort of give you the scope and the context from which we work in. So about our region, our primary role is healthcare provider, so the hospitals, GPs, ambulance services, psychiatry, and also social institutions, among other things. It's a large organization, over 19,000 employees, spanning over 17 municipalities and 7,200 square miles, and soon to be even larger because we're merging with the capital region as well. So yeah, that'll be the biggest one in Denmark. And previously, there have been very ambitious efforts and initiatives aimed at enhancing the green transition and climate adaptation, which my coworker Louise will talk more about in a minute. And then climate resilience has primarily, from a healthcare sector perspective, been rather sparse and segregated and siloed. We strive to be a bit more holistic. Often it's sort of the peripheral stakeholder that you include in some planning, but I think at least for our sake, and I think for many of the other regions, a project of this caliber is sort of a first and is very interesting, but also makes it a bit more complex navigating through. And the primary risk types that we have in our region is extreme downpour and then secondary extreme heat. Then I'll pass it on to my co-worker Louise, who will talk a bit about the overall strategy in green transition we have, and then I'll follow up after that. Thank you.
Well, hello. I'm Louise. I'm a co-worker of Oliver, and we're in two different units. So we kind of had the same agenda, and therefore we're collaborating. But I'm in the unit that's called Green Transitioning. And as part of our green transition and climate adaptation, we made this green future that was politically approved by our region in May this year. And then we have this 10-year strategy of how we want to, how do you say, like, make these various strategies of how to reduce our CO2 emission. And therefore climate adaptation is also part of it to make sure that we don't make maladaptation. So I'm only going to present some of the strategy because there's lots of aspects of it, and including our strategy, we have these kind of procedures that's redeveloped every 2 years to evaluate like how far are we and what are our current challenges to make sure that we end up where we want in 10 years. So, but basically, the climate crisis is above all also a health crisis. So the WHO has declared climate change the greatest health threat of our time. That's because rising temperatures leads to extreme weather, increased pollution, and which directly affects our public health. And particularly, it impacts vulnerable groups, which increases health inequalities in our country. I don't know if it seems like Oliver can push the button. With climate change, it means there'll be pressure on the healthcare system and supply security as well, with more like frequent disease outbreaks as well as expected to change like changing living conditions in Denmark, along with future natural disasters. Therefore, it's important that we act now to prevent decision makings when we're already standing with the consequences of climate change. So the green transition of the healthcare system, it's not really an easy task because it's an old fundament, and there's kind of two main tasks on a hospital. There's like taking care of all our patients and our citizens, but meanwhile we also have an agenda of reducing CO2 and to climate adapt, which could be a challenge sometimes. But it's important that we integrate this green transition into the development of our future healthcare system. It means that we need to be pro new treatments methods and increase focus on prevention and digitization of our climate footprint while ensuring the best care for our citizens now and in the future. Climate change or extreme weather events can have serious consequences for our infrastructure, energy and water supply, as well as our public buildings, such as the hospitals. This is additionally the consequence of how public health is affected by it. And all of it puts our healthcare system under pressure. Therefore, it's important that we, as a region, work to reduce our CO2 emissions, meanwhile also adapting our buildings, areas, and infrastructure to the climate changes now and in the future. And as mentioned before, cloudbursts, heavy downpouring, and heat is our main challenges, which means that we need to find resilient solutions that can handle future challenges. So it's a long-term investment in robustment and also supply security. So there's a two-lane strategy for it, and something we need to be aware of in this climate adaptation. There's both the health consequences of the changing climate, that we will get new pests and diseases. Meanwhile, it also means that if we have more natural disasters, a vulnerable citizen, people who are disabled, patients who needs to go to the hospital but not necessarily is on the hospital, like cancer patients, they need to feel safe that the hospitals are working no matter what conditions the weather are. And it can lead to this feeling of being anxious if you're feeling isolated, if the weather is too bad. And meanwhile, we also need to make sure that our infrastructure meets the challenges, such as do the citizens feel safe that no matter the weather, there's always an ambulance that can come and help you. So it's an assessment of the regional buildings, as well as a plan for investment in climate protection, as well as ensuring stable energy supply during extreme weather. And it's a lot of it is investment in cloudburst protection and drainage systems, such as construction sites where it's needed, where increased use of green roofs, rainwater collection, and permeable surfaces in facilities and outdoor areas. And then along with the contingency plans that address the increased threat picture associated with ongoing climate changes. Thanks. That's all for me.
Cool. Thank you very much, Louise. Can you all hear me? Yep, nodding. Right, so I'll just follow up on that a bit. So some of the current challenges we have on sort of a regional level is this former climate adaptation initiatives, and also the strategy put forth by Louise has predominantly been a green transition and climate adaptation angle. So that's been working a lot on that. I believe 6% of the national carbon footprint is from the healthcare sector. So we also feel quite a responsibility to act on it, being a big actor who's pushing it up. There's a lot of single use and medicine and long supply chains, and also just being a big, employer for a lot of people. It comes with a lot of emissions added to it. So taking that ownership, I think, was probably the biggest step that the regions have taken, sort of from a national level or cross-regionally at least, which is quite ambitious and good that they've done that. So, but climate resilience has primarily been reactive from sort of an emergency preparedness perspective. It's always been sort of a bit, reactive, done and siloed approach, whereas like the bigger, broader climate adaptation has been more carbon neutrality and emissions reducing focused, and not so much always resilience. Sometimes it might be a byproduct, but not sort of like in a streamlined or cross-regional way. And that's also why the focused mitigation efforts have been rather sporadic and reactive, but also locally, because if they've had problems with some extreme downpour and flooding, then they might have done some things if it's been really, really bad, but there's sort of not a lot of wiggle room to nip stuff in the bud before it becomes an issue, because as I'm sure everyone who works with healthcare can agree, you're always understaffed or pushed for resources, regardless of where you are. You could always use more. And yeah, there's but this new strategy for climate resilience, the one that Louise just presented just before, is one page of the overall strategy, and I think there's about 20 pages in it. So it's one page. So at least it's come in now, but it's sort of come in whilst we were doing this without us really being too much aware that that was an ambition, but that's lucky that it overlaps with it. But that just shows, again, big organization. People don't always share things from organization to organization. So we're sort of in the early days of honing the scope of how we'll reach these strategic initiatives as presented as before. And then I will go to some of the local challenges that we've identified. So the primary risk is extreme downpour. Not to say that storm surges and flooding from coastal areas is not a big risk in Denmark. I think 92% of the country is surrounded by, coastline. So there is a lot of problems with that. But a lot of the hospitals are situated where it's either not too much of a problem or then a bit further in. So the direct impact from a healthcare provider perspective is why that's sort of been pushed down. It's not to sort of downplay the necessity of storm surges, because on a national level, that is one of the higher risks as well among extreme downpour. But for us, intents and purposes, we can act better when it's on sort of our building level. It's further complicated once we go out and in sort of invade the municipalities area, and that's where they have to act, and we have to work together with them. And yeah, with 17 municipalities, you can guess the complexity also arises after that. But yeah, most pressingly, we've identified one of our hospitals that's been experiencing former 20-year events of extreme downpour every 3 to 5 years. And just a couple of years ago, they had a really, really bad one. So that's why we pushed that one up as the identified primary risk. But also acknowledging that the slow creeping hazard of increasing temperatures is worth bearing in mind as well, because as anyone who works in healthcare, especially in Southern Europe, I'm sure you're aware that it really pushes, even the indirect pushing of the healthcare system around. More people are dependent on the healthcare services, as well as employees who have their own kids, family, network that they have to take care of in these situations as well. That can also push. They might not be able to take the extended shifts as normally expected. So that's worth bearing in mind as well. So just to go back to the sort of specific case of this hospital with the extreme downpour, just to be a bit specific. So we had the flooding caused the health appointments to be postponed. So there were MRIs and physiotherapy down in the basement, and the patients who were booked for that had to be moved to other places or other hospitals, or most of them had to be postponed. And it also disrupted the use of medical equipment and facilities for up to a week because they had to dry everything up. And not just dry everything up, it was also flooding from sewage. So it was contaminated water as well. And you don't want that anywhere, but especially not at the hospital. So yeah, there was a lot of cleaning and making sure that that was up to scratch before we could open up again. And yeah, that just made it even more complex because flooding is expensive and difficult to manage regardless of what type of water, but even more so when it's contaminated water. Luckily, the worst of the flooding of the previous one was contained to the cellar. However, future events may bring further cascading impacts, and there have been some servers and other backup generators that have maybe been placed places where they shouldn't have, and we're working on optimizing that. So to sort of make sure that the energy and also the not just the material supply, but also the data and digital services, that they can be backed up properly and also provide the services they need to when treating patients. There's also the patient and staff well-being, and critical services being disrupted in times of need. So possible mitigation options for here is that our initial findings suggest that the issue stems from an old sewage and water reservoirs, and these are off-site and also owned by the local municipalities and all private supply companies that are partially owned by the municipality or fully. And seemingly there's no plan for local climate adaptation in that hazard area, because they're about going on 90 years old, these reservoirs, so it's a bit of an old area. So the moral dilemma that we sort of we're pushed for right now is that the readily, quick, and cheaper solution does not really mitigate it. We could maybe invest a bit, and then we could pump back out into the municipality's water supply and basins, but that will just transfer the risk. Long-term solution is slower, but is more likely to mitigate the root cause. We could divert it properly away and spread it out on big areas, and also keep it in areas and keep this rainwater reservoir and the sewage reservoir more segregated so it doesn't mix. But then here comes the sort of the issue that we're contemplating at the moment, is that we're critical infrastructure, and we need to act and do something about this quick, but long bureaucratic processes, and also someone else should maybe pay for it, but how long can we stretch that? So yeah, we need to act, but at what cost? Those are the sort of the issues that we're surrounded with in this specific case. And yeah, would appreciate any thoughts on that from anyone. I think that's about all I had on that topic. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to follow up. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Oliver and Luis. I might just give a few seconds in case somebody, in fact, does have a question. Let me also double check in the chat.
We have a question in the chat. Yeah.
Yes. So we have one question from Holly around how the challenges we face in the health sector are so similar, and what was the climate resilience strategy you mentioned done through P2R, or was it different? Was the climate resilience strategy you mentioned done through P2R? Was it different?
Yep. So I quickly mentioned it, but there was a lot of info in a short amount of time. And this strategy was actually put forth by someone else in our organization who had done it sort of top down, and made this strategic initiatives about the one page in the big strategy that's focused on green transition and climate adaptation predominantly. Then there was just sort of like an extra page of climate resilience. These are sort of our initiatives going into the future, but didn't specify on how. And that's more what we've been working on now. So identifying there's these hospitals and what their challenges are, how can we fix it? It's the municipality problem, moral dilemma issue in that specific case. And then we want to make a sort of expanded strategy that's a bit more hands-on and not too much just a mission vision sort of level of commitment. And also yeah, just also again, you have to constantly remind people to think about this in a big organization. So I don't know if that answered your question, Holly.
Thank you very much. Any other question, you can raise your hand or you can write in the chat, whatever feels more comfortable for you.
I had a question. I was trying to find the raise hand option. I don't see it, but I just was, because you had mentioned that there was quite a siloed approach with the different partners and stakeholders, and kind of bringing it all together was like, I guess, an obstacle. I was wondering if there was any memorandum of understandings between, or if you're working on something like that between different actors, so that everybody kind of knows what their role is when a disaster strikes, and then, you know, who would take action, who would lead, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think in relation to climate resilience, we're not that mature on working together, especially when it's the healthcare sector pushing into doing something. So that's quite new, and that in itself makes it difficult. Because previously there was legislation that said that we could sort of be the go-between between different municipalities. So actually where Louise used to work previously was called regional development, and they could facilitate and acquire funds through EU projects, etc., and then facilitate in a broader scope, like these 5 municipalities share borders or similar problems, and then they would work in that. Now we've had a healthcare reform where we have to change how we work. We can only work with climate adaptation on our own sort of buildings, and that whole process has sort of just put us back a couple of years in some ways, especially that this is also a bit new, and that even though it's climate adaptation, it also, a lot of people see climate adaptation and climate resilience in the same ballpark. But we're trying to put it up because everyone's talking about resilience and security and preparedness these days. So we're trying to sort of angle it in that. And that's also what I work with and my department works with on a daily basis. So that's sort of the umbrella we're trying to put it on that can sometimes push the necessity to act. Because if you're climate resilient, you're not just resilient against climate, you can also be resilient against other things because you're looking at it holistically, is what we're trying to advocate.
Okay, thank you so much.
Very
And
good.
yes,
Any
as
other
Louise says
question?
there, it's quite new.
Right. Very good. Okay, so let's move on to our next segment. And this segment is really all about trying to now reflect and inspired on what Louise and Oliver has told us and spoken about and so to take that as an inspiration to think about, okay, how could this look like in our different contexts? And I would like for all of you to put on your expert hat, and we're going to work with the following. And let me share my screen. So we came up with this SIPS framework to help us think about a way in which we can go through and assess different ways in which health services are impacted. And we really want to think about what happens with staff and skills at the health facilities when climate impacts strike, what happens with infrastructure and the equipment that staff need to be able to work with and provide services. Also, what happens with the processes and protocols that are in place? Are they living up to the challenges when normal operation is disrupted by climate impacts? And finally, what happens with all the supply and logistics that are needed by these different health facilities? And we're going to work with Padlet. I'm going to share in a minute the link for that, to create mini domino runs. And we really want to understand sort of what is the domino effect that you think might happen based on what you know, what you're familiar with your context, with your region, and see if we can go a little bit beyond what Louise and Oliver told us. And we're going to work from of course, we have different climate hazards. We're going to work with intense rainfall, just to keep in line with what Oliver and Louise was explaining, and to help us to narrow down a little bit our scope. And the way we're going to do that is for these 4 areas, so staff and skills, infrastructure and equipment, pros and protocols, supply and logistics, we're going to do 4 rounds. We want to think first, okay, for these 4 components, what are the initial vulnerabilities that we can see that might happen in case of intense rainfall? And we're going to think just with that on that round at first. We're going to ignore the other ones. And once we finish that, will take us a couple of minutes, we can go to round 2. So, okay, based on these vulnerabilities that we've identified, that we've come up with, what would be the plausible direct consequences linked with that? And from there, the cascading impacts. So what are the more nuanced down the line knock-on effects that might happen? And finally, right, in which way we can, through cross-sector coordination, eventually overcome some of these. So I'm sharing the link in the chat, and the way we're going to do that, so the link will take you to this Padlet. And what we have here, we have 4 columns. Each of these columns is each of these 4 areas: staff and skills, infrastructure and equipment, pros and protocols, supply, and logistics. Just to confirm, you're seeing my screen, because I'm not seeing the sharing frame on my screen. So
yeah, we can see it, Marcel.
Okay, great, thank you. And we're going to take these first few minutes and just focus on round 1, our initial vulnerabilities. What are the most immediate vulnerability? What is the most immediate vulnerability from extreme rainfall? And again, I want you not to think about the Zealand situation, but I want you to think about your context. What do you know? What might happen with health facilities and health services in your region if there would be extreme rainfall? And I know in many places, clearly the weather isn't great at this moment, as we've seen at the beginning. What are vulnerabilities that health services are exposed to? And only once we tell you, okay, let's move on to the following round, then we can talk about direct consequences. So the first 2 rounds you will do with me. The last 2 rounds, round 3 and 4, you'll do with Stephanie. To add to this, and this is my final comment, is you have here under each of these boxes, you have here add comment, and you can add your idea here, and don't forget to press submit, and then the comment will be added to that initial round. What do you say? Thumbs up or any sort of reaction if you think this is clear and good? Yes. Okay, superb. So let's take 2 minutes, and I'm going to remain quiet to give you time to think. It is you don't need to sign up to this platform. So once you go in, it will ask you to sign up or to just provide a name. If you want to do anonymous, it will assign a random name to you. No need for that. So what really is important here is our ideas overall. So I'll be quiet for the next 2 minutes to give you time to think. Okay, I see a few people. I see some very interesting comments coming in. I see a few people are still writing, so let's give it another minute. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much for all your ideas. I think it's great. Let's have a quick look. So for staff and skills, I think that we have a theme here that has to do with access. The challenge of staff to be able to access, either because of disruption of transport, there might be poor communication, coordination of the team. Absolutely. This is somewhat also linked with process and protocols, preparedness and planning, also linked with that. We have, again, access being an issue if staff are not used to, so may not sufficiently prepared to enforce the different process and protocols for this kind of situation. Damage in households, so right, so also there might be damage that staff has in their home and they have to take care of the family before they go to work, so that puts them in a very difficult position to have to choose between their own family and the well-being of the people they care for. Infrastructure and equipment, right, so anything in low-lying areas, flood-prone areas, and then critical equipment maybe being operated in areas of the premises that might be known or not to be flood prone, which is of course enhanced by poor drainage systems. An example here of okay, then of course is leading to medical equipment being destroyed. Again, also an access idea. And then when we talk about process and protocols, I see the theme here has to do with either the absence of process and protocols in order to deal with these situations, or people not necessarily being as familiar with what the process and protocols are, so they can operate them when as expected. And then we have supply and logistics, the disruptions, so again related to with access, and then the ability of supplies being able to get to the hospital, also the storage of goods, again linked with where are they stored within the medical facility in relation to what the flood prone areas are. And let's see, lack of essential services, flooded shops, supply and logistics disruption. This is really great stuff. Let's now go over to round 2. And I want you to think what you have here. If you have another idea, of course, to round 1, you can add it at any point in time. But thinking about what we have so far for each of these 4 pillars, if you put yourself in a context. If you imagine this hypothetical situation where all of these things come together and happen, and these initial vulnerabilities, some of them are already some sort of consequence, but these initial vulnerabilities are in play, what are the direct consequences that would stem from that? So if staff has to stay home, if they cannot access, what is the direct consequence of that? If we have damaged goods, damaged equipment, then maybe you can even think about specific specialties, specific kind of either emergency treatment or longer term treatment. What are the direct consequences of that? Same with the process and protocols and supply and logistics. So again, I'll be quiet for 2-3 minutes and give you the headspace to think about, if these things are in play, what happens next? Okay, 1 more minute. Okay, this is really, really interesting. So with staff and skills, right, so we have here a theme around, of course, either patients not receiving the treatment because staff are not there, or staff are overstretched. Hence, we cancel surgeries. The care that they receive is of a lesser quality. The timeliness and also timeliness and quality of care or treatment goes down. They can also put themselves at direct risk, double factor, adding to less staff and more patients, right? So of course there will be, because of flooding, most likely also an influx of patients to the hospital. So it's kind of two-sided effect: canceled surgeries, shortage of staff, increased pressure on staff, a lot of fatalities or morbidity, I would assume, health problems increase, different triage system. This is very interesting. I'm not sure exactly what you mean, or in what way the triage system would change. If this has to do because they're changing it to adjust to the time constraints, or because of preparedness and how to do a triage system. So if whoever wrote this, if you click on these little buttons and edit it, and maybe want to add an extra layer of information here, I think it would be super interesting, because I think that's a unique point in this list. On infrastructure and equipment, right, so we have sick and injured people cannot reach the hospital, so they cannot receive the care. And then if servers are damaged, and this is, I think, also very interesting with all the digital platforms to manage patients. How would that change, or how would the administrative process change if that is no longer available, and we would eventually, in some cases, need to go back to a bit more of an analog tracking of who comes in and who receives what, if that in fact does happen. Direct consequence of damaged infrastructure, such as water, energy supply, can adversely affect patient care. Scheduled treatments are likely to be canceled, and emergency treatment may be limited to due to constraints of the backup generators if they're not affected for patients. Infected equipment, right? So that also reduced then the available resources, and equipment has to go for downtime, power outages, flooded households, and public infrastructure. Very good. And protocols and process. So patients are moved to different wards or even locations. Confusion from staff, inconsistent or delayed response in patient treatment, contamination from sewage waters. This would make the last, I think, is very interesting, the confusion from staff, and that has to do with how well they are familiar and prepared with these protocols, if these protocols account for all of these scenarios. Contamination from sewage waters, I think it would probably be a bit more in infrastructure bits. Poor consequences of poor protocols and processes to lack of testing can result in poorly prepared staff, as well as slow down any decision-making processes needed in an emergency. So this is also interesting. So the two layers, the kind of more operational bit to deliver services, and then the decision-making process, which has to do with a more macro operational view of the health facility. Without a plan, chaos and poor problem handling can occur, and most likely poor decision making, and again a decrease in care in quality of care. Illnesses spread faster. And finally, supply logistics. Right, so the care for the sick cannot be provided. The supplies run out. There's loss of medicine and supplies. There's again an access problem for ambulances, which again lead to timeliness of healthcare, disruption of supply materials, and spreading of bacteria. This is really, really interesting. So the two final rounds, and then at the end we'll bring it back together. And with that, I want to hand it over to my colleague Stephanie, who will take you through the last two rounds.
Thanks, Marcel. Thanks everyone for the inputs. It's very interesting, and I think we start to see, the chain going on. We started with the vulnerabilities, going on to the first and direct impact, so we can really see how things are cascading here on this scenario. And now, what I would like you to think about is the last round of impact. So, what is the ultimate impact, the final impact of these consequences? What does it mean for the patient care, or for the health and the health services in the wider sense? So, what would be the ultimate consequences of the lack of staff, of missing key staffs, of increasing the pressure of the staff, for example, for staff and skills, of losing the key equipment, the servers, the diagnostic treatments equipment, having equipment not available anymore. So I would like you to take a few minutes now to think about the ultimate, the last impact. So we have the final domino here in our impact chain, and we can really understand what could be the consequences for the healthcare services of this scenario. So I will leave you a few minutes to start making some inputs before we look at them all together.
Tiffany, can you scroll down so we can see it? Thank you.
Oh, yes, of course. I see if, let's give it a minute, and then we can review the results. Okay, I think we can start looking at the results. So for the Stefan scales, what we have here in terms of cascading impact, so the ultimate impact on patients and the healthcare system, is that, yeah, we can have the risk of having spreading of diseases among the staff with occurrence of bacteria resistant to antibiotics, poor health outcomes, potential higher death rate, yes, compromising the patient safety with healthcare no longer delivered properly, risk of losing the key staff as well. Yeah, and which is also what we have here. Yeah, key staff are not able to go to work, to turn up to work, because also their own family are also in needs. So yeah, missing daily staff, missing really critical staff. So it could have a lot of impacts on the patient care ultimately. Yeah. And exhausting the health staff as well. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the impact could be long-term also for the staff in terms of trusting the hospital then, and maybe leaving as well. So it's very interesting here. For the infrastructure and equipment, yeah, I mean, if we lose key infrastructure because it's damaged, key medical devices, we can no longer care for patients. They remain untreated. So it means lack of access to patient records as well, poor care, permanent loss of some infrastructure, interruption of health appointments as well, which could impact long-term chronic diseases as well. And yeah, absolutely. If the context of a hospital, if one is affected and has to cancel divert patients, pressure is diverted to also the neighboring healthcare facilities, which also creates a domino effect of adding more pressures on the health system in general outside of the immediate hazard zone. So not just concerning, so it doesn't just impact the hospital in itself, but also all the other proximities, all other health system in proximity, disrupted connections. Yes. Cascading impact for process and protocols would lead then to also missing incorrect information, resulting in incorrect treatment for patients, longer time spent in hospitals for patients. So yeah, poor outcomes, waiting lines as well. People will wait too long, so more severe health consequences. Yeah, people would lose trust also in the hospital. And finally, for the supplies and logistics, if we have interruption in the delivery of essential medicine, of supply materials, it means that then patients cannot leave the hospitals without the medication, so they will stay longer and have a poor health outcome. So we can see that there is a common impact here, for most of this aspects. It's really the impact of the patient care, of patients itself, on the health of the patient that will be more compromised. Without further deliveries, treatment can no longer be continued with permanent health impairment, due to lack of treatment. Worst case scenario being death. Higher criminal rates as well, with the loss of medicines. People would maybe resort to extreme cases, to extreme measures, or the risk of excessive use of materials with supplies running out and longer waiting time for materials, patient missing out on critical dose of medicines, and recovery period can have longer term implications. Catching up in the sector that is constantly playing catch up would inflate the recovery even more impact the recovery even more severely. So thank you for this this contribution. I think we have a good clear picture of what could be really the impact on extreme rain on the healthcare system and how patient care will be ultimately impacted in the end. Now with folder 1.4, we are now getting to one of Oliver's and Louis' issue that we're presenting regarding now how can we increase the resilience of the health system, considering all these impacts, all these risks that we have just talked about, and how can we coordinate among all these multiple stakeholders that we know are part of the chain to increase the resilience hospital? How can we work together, private actors, public actors, with each having different agendas, different priorities, different budget? How can we work together to increase the resilience of health system and help the system adapt to climate change without having to, with the objective of having a long-term adaptation to climate change? So sustaining the system for longer term and not having a short-term mitigation measure, which we know we just transfer the risk. So I will leave you for a few minutes also to give some inputs on also your experience here, or how can we manage such a difficult environment to increase the resilience? maybe just 1 more minute, if anyone has anything else to add to this section, so we can look at the whole picture. Okay. So I think we can start looking at what would be the recommendations to coordinate to increase resilience on these different aspects. So for the staff and skills, what we could do is to have communications and action plans in place, some partnership with local municipalities to designate the key priority access roads for flood protection, increasing the focus on cross-regional sectoral training of emergency personnel, so the police, the fire and safety department, as well as other national actors, so regional coordination. Teaching protocols, organized staff, working hours have to be the same as usual. Yeah, that's interesting indeed. So can we prepare internally, and also how can we coordinate and partner with local actors? And I think that's probably the 2 key points here. For infrastructure and equipment, it will be the preparation of infrastructure reconstruction priority lists, having some building adaptation measures in the surrounding area to protect buildings from extreme weather events, such as rainwater retention basins. Prepare a plan to move all the critical equipment also to higher floors to protect them from this scenario, and having some action plans, including the equipment and special places for more used materials, the ones that the hospital really needs. So yeah, absolutely, it will be really anticipating such impacts, anticipating the scenario to make sure that we don't lose the key infrastructure and the key equipment. And for the building adaptation and the measures in the surrounding area, I think that was that's the whole challenge when you have to coordinate them with local actors. So how to advocate then? Can we do that? Is it by advocating to local authorities as well to insist on how critical it is to maintain the hospital in a functioning state, and having partners also an agreement with the other regional actors involved into the municipality. For the process and protocols, will be action plans for extreme situations adapted to the building and its use, trained personnel, placing a higher standard of quality in the contracts for private stakeholders and vendors in relation to crisis management, organized leading clear instructions from government, having some preparedness plans in place, regularly tested with the staff. Yeah, I think the 2 key points are really here. So having the people trained, having a plan already in place for these extreme situations, and having the staff trained to react and to implement the plan, and also making sure that this crisis management plan is extended to our stakeholders, our key stakeholders. And for the supplies and logistics, it will be the implementation of having secured supply routes, even in extreme weather situation, secured then by other institutions, with also is close to what we had in the staff and skills sector, having coordination with other emergency personnel to ensure the safety and to ensure that we have safety roads to access the hospital, whether for patients or for the supplies as well and medicines. Yeah. Placing also a higher standard of quality in the contract for private stakeholders and vendors, making sure that medicine will be delivered as well, no matter the weather, no matter the situation, and having some critical reserves of goods already prepared just in case that roads will be, or the supplies will be shut down. Good. Well, thank you so much for participating in this exercise, for your inputs. I think it's very valuable, and we will share the results with you. But before we wrap up and close this session, I would like to ask maybe Ferdusa, our health experts, and Oliver also, if you have anything surprising, anything you were not expecting to see here, or what can we say about this results of advice also on how to coordinate for resilience? How can we increase the resilience of the health system? I don't know if something was helpful for you as well, Oliver, if you can relate to what has been said here for your context. And Ferdusa, also don't hesitate to comment if you have anything you would like to add.
Yeah, sure. I thought.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, I'll just be quick. I thought that the responses were really interesting. And it just goes to show how important it is to have like interventions that would be sort of cross-cutting benefits. But I think maybe it would also be interesting and important to have an early warning system for extreme weather events that would help to sort of prevent, injuries from floods, that would help us to track outbreaks from vector-borne illnesses and that kind of thing, and to ensure that there's a continuity of care in the health system. So I think that could also be something we could add as an example to strengthen the resilience of the healthcare system.
Thanks, Ferdusa. Thank you for the input. Oliver, you were going to say something?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of stuff to sort of go through. I think there's a lot of good input, and a lot of stuff. The idea is good, but how do we do it in real life is another thing. But yeah, you can't cover everything every time.
Yeah.
I think especially the advocating the necessity to act and sort of like, yeah, I think we tend to too much push stuff into that's your responsibility, that's your sector. It'd be better with more of a let's together fix this, because we're all affected in one shape or another, and especially related to health. I think everyone can agree, National Healthcare Service, you want to keep that protected, regardless if you're fit or not. So
Yeah, I think the partnership here is really key. Is really having everyone around the table and agree that on what are the key priorities also as a country, as a region.
definitely.
But thank you for your input, Oliver, and thanks for all our participants. I will pass it on to Marcel to wrap up the session. And
thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you very much to all of you for participating in this really interesting exercise. I have to say, we were able to dig up a lot of very interesting ideas, and it's really nice to see sort of different perspectives coming through and nuances that are often a little bit hidden when we just talk about these things in a more superficial way. So this was really a deep dive into this causal effect that happens. So that was really interesting to do. Thank you very much for that. With that, I would like to bring this IPG to an end, and I want to remind you that this is only the third IPG in this series, and you will see in the chat a link to the IPG week number 3. When you click in there, you can register for any of these other IPGs that are coming up. Again, I want to thank you. I want to thank Oliver, Luis, and Ferdusa for all your contributions. And you will see now on your screen popping up a little survey. That survey really helps us to keep improving these IPGs. And with that, I want to invite you to respond to it. And thank you for joining us today. And I hope to see you during the next few IPGs.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.